Do you guys ever think about dying?
Hey sis, welcome to the Mama Trauma Barbie podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Wagner, and while I'm tough as a mother, sometimes I know we're all out here, tired of needing to be one. Buckle up as we land the mothership and all things motherhood in the real world. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our ridiculously amazing sponsors who saw an opportunity to support women in their day-to-day journeys by joining together to make this podcast a reality. Thank you, Jennifer Panzician with Edward Jones, Precision Spinal Care, Neuroflex Juice Company, Chica Creative, law offices of Jennifer Antonini, and the Joss District for believing in better care, better support, and better outcomes for mamas and their families. Hey mamas, great to have you back with me for another episode of the Mama Trauma Barbie podcast. This next topic, well, it's quite personal for me, and it's the why behind starting the pod. You see, this generation of mamas, we're up against a lot, and we're only a stone throw away from even gaining the right to vote, fully participate in the workforce, go after our dreams, create brilliance, and live our lives out loud. Unfortunately, because we are only a stone throw away from these advancements in women's rights, we're still brushing up against a system that wants to fully allow them. You see, becoming a mom, it changed everything for me. It made me better, and it humbled me in ways I didn't even know I needed humbled. However, having children with health complications, that opened my eyes to not only show me what's wrong in our world, but what's wrong in our society, in our workplaces, and it showed me what's literally killing women and children and what we need to do to improve these dismal outcomes. I think so many of us knew there could be complications during our pregnancies, or we knew the risks, we knew the what ifs, and we knew the tragedies that could be. And we held our breath and we prayed, and many of us squeezed by to live what one would call a normal life. Of course, we all knew misfortune could and would happen, and if not to us, then by the proximity of experiencing the heartache and pain from watching a loved one struggle with their own calamity. I thought I'd squeezed by. I thought we were well on our way towards a normal life when all of a sudden our daughter woke up at 4 years old as a completely different version of herself. I remember the day it all happened, and I remember the day after it happened. It's odd, honestly, almost like I've lived two completely different lives as part of my motherhood. Somehow, during that time, I'd lost my daughter, even though she was physically here. It was like a living death. It was so weird because my family, friends, and colleagues didn't understand for the longest time. Some never did. I don't know. I don't think some ever will. Hell, I didn't understand it for the longest time. It's why I invited my next guest to join me on Mama Trauma Barbie podcast. She took what I was not able to articulate for so long and turned not only my journey, but her family's journey and the many families out here with PANS, and turned that experience into an educational series to help others. She took something so negative, so misunderstood, and turned it into a positive to help many others who are finding themselves lost and confused in this journey. Listening to this podcast today could not only help a family, but could change the trajectory for a family and their children for generations to come. That's the power of education. That's the power of loving our neighbors ridiculously well. And that's why I'm so excited to introduce you to my next guest. Emilia Metzel is a sociologist and motion graphics designer from Poland. She founded Life Science Animation Studio with her husband, Frank, and together they are trying to bridge the gap between science and the public by turning complex scientific topics into animated videos. When their twins suddenly got sick with a mysterious disease, they struggled to get any help or answers from their healthcare system. After a few months of intense digging and desperately looking for specialists, they got the diagnosis of their children's illness, PANS and PANDAS. Getting the diagnosis and finding the right doctors was the beginning of their children's recovery. In the process, they realized how huge the gap between science and clinical practice was, and how bridging this gap could help many other parents in the same situation. Once the health of their children improved, Emilia embarked on a mission to educate and raise awareness of the disease through her weekly PANS series, created under the name Beyond PANS. And with that, help me welcome my new friend, Emilia Metzel.
Thanks, and thanks for connecting with me. I think it was a very surprising connection we've made, and I'm happy to share part of our story with you.
This podcast episode is a little different from some of the other ones that I have done in that you and I have never met before. We have never spoke, but unfortunately, we both are a part of a club that I don't think either one of us would have picked on our own, but it is indeed, it's special. It's got, while we both would agree now, maybe some positive outcomes from it. It was not an easy entry into the club. It was not an easy way through it. And so that's what brings us together, because both of us have children who have experienced PANS, pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome. And so, like I said, it's definitely a part of a club, but that's how we got connected. You have this brilliant initiative and movement that you have put together, Amelia, called Beyond PANS. And you have taken art and science, morphed it together, and come up with this unprecedented way to really talk about PANS and portray it in a way that I've never seen done. What I love about your work, and when I saw it, was that for so long I had no idea how to put this journey into words, and you did. And it moved me. I teared up when I was scrolling through everything that you had done. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you for taking what I know was not an easy path. We're going to talk more about it, but I'd love to hear more about your journey and just get listeners up to speed on how you got here.
Sure. I'm very happy to share this story with you and how Beyond PANS came from our journey. I have 7-year-old twins. They are 7 in a few weeks, a boy and a girl. Actually, they are both diagnosed with PANS, but as my daughter was a severe case, sudden onset, very sudden, very severe, and like 2,000 symptoms all at once. And my son was rather gradual and mild, I would say. Usually when I talk about our story, I focus more on her story, but, having 2 children with this, with a completely different presentation of symptoms, though they are twins, gives me even more insight into the complexity of this disease. So it was a big shock to find out exactly the week where we have figured out the diagnosis for my daughter. Of course, we diagnosed her ourselves as for months. Doctors just basically sent us home or from specialist to specialist exactly the same week when I finally found the answer. And I was almost shocked at how many symptoms from the list my daughter has. The same week, my son started presenting his own symptoms. As they both had strep at the same time, then she got dramatically worse. This was her second flare, I would say. And new symptoms appeared, motoric symptoms, which she never had before. And this led me finally to the diagnosis. And this was the first time that he started so strongly showing his own symptoms. And what I wanted to say is, in the beginning, it was extremely overwhelming to figure out that now we're facing, not only we've just found out the diagnosis, and now we actually are facing 2 children with this. But I have to say now, with a perspective, that it's actually been a blessing for us, and on many levels, because not only it's so much easier to navigate the whole family when children have the same problem, and you can expect similar reactions to certain things from them, but they also understand each other so much better now, because when Luna started showing her symptoms, he was, I think, the person who was the most hit by the disease in the family, because Luna was kind of gone, meaning she was not fully there. She was not fully experiencing, I have a feeling, all these things that we saw from the outside. We were for sure very worried and overwhelmed, but he was the one who was completely confused with this, especially when, I ended up in hospital with Luna for 11 days, hoping for some diagnosis. And he and my husband would visit us, and he was so happy to see me. My husband was happy to see my daughter, but she was in such a state that she hardly reacted to them. And this was probably the most difficult part for us, having to sort the issue with him on top of this. And when he got sick a few months after her, not only he started understanding it better, but also they have become amazing support for each other. So when one is flaring more than the other is trying really to be supportive. I'm not talking about some extreme cases with, extreme rages and aggression, but this is something which has been a big surprise for us, because I didn't expect that such small kids could have this awareness. And at the moment, I'm happy they both have it, because it's easier for us to handle it. And it's just one of the fears we had in the beginning was she may not be able to go back to school, but we will have to send him to school. They were so bonded from the beginning. They spent every second of their life together, and this thought that we would have to separate them and send him to school and while keep her at home, this was one of the biggest challenges in my head. I had like the fear of the future. What then? Like, he will feel miserable that he's alone there. We're all three of us at home. She won't have a chance to experience this. And now the problem is gone. They are on this boat together. Luckily, they are back to school, which has been the best thing that happened in the last weeks, actually. That they've been back to school for 2 months now, after 1 year at home. So as you can imagine, we are like an extremely amazing place now, as everything has turned out so much better than we thought at the beginning. But the story is not over. It will take a long time. As you know, this is a long battle, but we're in a very good place now, and that's why I also started this Beyond Pants weekly series.
Life happens. You can't predict the unexpected, but you can prepare. Your Edward Jones financial advisor, Jennifer Panzician, can help you with your financial goals, planning with life's ups and downs in mind. Call 419-841-2627 to get started. Edward Jones, member SIPC. You've said so much. I wrote down some words while you were talking. Overwhelming. You basically talked about how this is a family affair. The diagnosing, right? And just from the beginning of where you were to where you are, and you said this is a long battle, and battle is in fact the appropriate word to use for this, right? And then the fear of the future. And so as you were talking, I think this is so many of the words and the feelings that so many PANS families are dealing with, but you also brought up the positives that came out of this. And so those are some different areas that I want to lean into. But I feel the reason that this is so hard to talk about publicly is because of what happened with me and where I think so many families are. And again, your background is you are a creative director in a life science animation company, right? And so it was almost divine that someone like yourself went through this to be able to take what is this battle and turn it into a story that is needing to be told out here in our society and in our world. I don't think it's well understood because of what is behind the curtain. And so maybe together we can both talk about, like, I know even people in my network, like, they know part of my story, but they don't know all of it. And I think that's what's been so great about your illustration. And I know that we've been taught in this world of disability to be very careful with our wording, and that is so important, and we should. But I mean, truly, when we say in the PANS community that these kids lose their mind and they are crazy, we aren't exaggerating. And that is exactly what is happening. And so would you be able to share, I think some of the symptoms or some of our experiences are what's missing out here for providers, for the educational system, for other families, neighbors, for them to understand what's truly going on. So would you be able to just paint some of those symptoms, or maybe, I'd be happy to even share one of our more extreme cases as to what went on, but I just don't think people understand what's going on and then how long it's going on.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. It's really hard to explain these symptoms to anyone, when I try to talk about them, I see that even what comes off my mouth doesn't even paint half of this picture. It's very difficult because many of these symptoms overlap with some behaviors in children which are kind of normal. Every child sometimes has a rage attack. Every child sometimes cries for no reason. Somehow this is this part which is so difficult to explain. So being able to put it into pictures and like writing about it, myself, I was surprised about how much it has helped me also explain this to my family and friends. Of course, most of people who we always talked about it openly, but most people who we talked about this with never saw our children in this state, because when a child is flaring, you stay at home and you don't see anyone. And when they visit, often the child for a moment, becomes better because there is some kind of a distraction. And this is really this gap between what's happening and behind the closed doors and what people outside see, even those who are informed, is so huge that I'm seeing myself how I'm benefiting from explaining this in these pictures. So as for these symptoms, I will tell you, what we went, what kind of symptoms we went through, and they were like changing month by month, which was also interesting. One would disappear, but a new one would appear. So it's we know that this is not the end and something new may come. But we started with when Luna was hit overnight, she started having very extreme mood and personality changes, very extreme mood swings, which were I've never seen in my life. A person going from happy and laughing to breaking down, crying for really sometimes no reason. Like this would really be just so insignificant that would get her out of the balance, and then she would be dysregulated for hours. Then she started having moments where she was depressive. She even started expressing it in this way, which was very worrying. She said, when a 5.5-year-old says something like, "Mom, recently nothing gives me joy anymore. In the past, I loved to laugh, but now you can't make me laugh anymore." These were really such strange things to hear from a child, especially that, when you looked at her from the outside, still like physically, she didn't show the worst symptoms yet. But in her head, she must have been going through a lot already then. Then started very extreme problems around bedtime. They really hit the moment I would stop reading a book. She would be fine before. The moment I would start reading the book, she would start really going crazy, rolling from side to side in bed. This took hours. And she would scream things like, "Help me, I can't sleep, brain, stop." She would have hallucinations. A few times she saw my head getting bigger or the room getting longer, which was probably the scariest parts of our experience, as I was sure then that some kind of tumor must be in her head, because I've never heard of anyone having hallucinations without some structural problems in the brain. So then started sensory issues, which were not constant. Also, many of these symptoms would just suddenly come and disappear. So it's not that she was all day having symptoms. It was like hitting like a lightning. She would start covering her ears, even when there was no sound. She hid herself under the blanket. She hardly could talk about these symptoms when they hit. She was so overwhelmed by them that she was not speaking, which made it so much harder to understand what's going on. Only once she got a bit better, months later, she was able a bit more to talk about this. And the reason why for a very long time we didn't think it could be PANS, though I knew the disease already 1 year earlier, before this disease started, because I was always kind of interested in all these medical unusual cases. And I always thought to myself, wow, what a crazy disease. I can't even imagine that you can be hit by this. And interesting thing is, when we got hit by this, and I even checked, could it be this? I thought, no, it can't be. My daughter doesn't have OCD and she doesn't have tics. And they say you need this or food restriction. None of these key criteria my daughter fulfilled. So I thought it can't be this. Everything else, these, let's call them side symptoms she had, But, I followed the official guidelines and I dismissed this idea. And only then when my daughter flirted for the second time and she started having some motoric issues, some strange movements, doing strange things with her fingers. This didn't look like tics, but you could see that this is out of her control. And that's for the first time when I came across information on the internet that these motoric disturbances don't have to be jerky movements. They can be some other motoric issues. And that's when finally everything became clear. And as for OCD, I also always thought that OCD shows up in behaviors of a person. And often that's how it's described online, that, there are obsessions and there are compulsions. And you usually see when the child is, having some funny rituals. It turned out only months later that many of her overwhelming symptoms, also this bedtime craziness, were kind of attacks of intrusive thoughts. I don't have a clue what these thoughts really are, as she can't explain them. I know that they are very difficult for her. But these were just sudden thoughts or images or memories coming. And it took us months to figure out that this was just nothing else than a form of OCD. So our son had a more typical version of OCD. Luckily, he's relatively mild, so probably we would never end up with the diagnosis if not for our daughter's story. But his OCD is typical. So, when he's got this worst period after an infection, he stays very long in the bathroom, making sure he's cleaned himself properly. He has some funny behaviors, like, smelling his hands or making sure things are aligned. These things are harmless, and I don't think they disrupt his daily life a lot, though I'm aware that they can develop in the future. But the reason why our daughter didn't have these type of symptoms, which I thought they should look like, this was also one of the reasons why I started this series, because I knew that if somebody talked about it in the way that I'm talking about it now, showing all these nuances, instead of just listing bullet points of the disease, probably we would have come to the diagnosis much earlier, and many other parents would. And I have a feeling that a lot of information online on this topic is very dry. Like I said, these are bullet points. These are some like very common average things, but nobody gets very deep into this. And I thought if I break down every symptom, like as much as I can visually and in text, I may be able to help many parents get to this diagnosis faster. And that's already what happened many times. I'm surprised with how many children, maybe thanks to what I've done, probably got to their diagnosis faster, because like me, many parents just didn't know what OCD looks like in a child, or what what is considered a normal tantrum. A 5-year-old can still have a tantrum, and what is a rage attack, which has nothing to do with a tantrum. Because once you have seen this, when I tell my friends, she had this severe rage attack, I think everyone imagines a typical child's tantrum, but this is so much different. And the way a child's face looks, then their voice, I don't know if you've experienced this too, but for my daughter, the moment she would get one of her attacks, really, it looked as if she was possessed by a devil. Everything changed in her face, and her voice changed, and the words she spoke were not her words. And I was so often shocked, because it reminded me, there were films about movies about exorcists and trying to get the devil out of a child. And really, it's so close to how it's portrayed in the film. And only if you see it with your own eyes, you understand how it differs from a regular tantrum. So I'm trying to now, with all my memories of these moments, I'm trying to make it now with the help of AI, which I'm very grateful for. Is without these AI generated images, I would never be able to show it. So I'm very happy that I managed to do it in a way which resonates with many parents who go through this.
Thank you for sharing all of that. We also went through different stages of this as well. When my daughter was 4, it was the restrictive eating, it was the social anxiety, it was the urinary frequency. And, as she got older, and in the middle of her journey, it was very much the rage. And then we kind of got maintained, and then from there. And so Liv ended up getting Lyme at the end of, or at the beginning of last year. And, from that, it was OCD. I mean, her OCD and her intrusive thoughts were extremely high. And so it's interesting as you bring up through this diagnosis that some of these symptoms, they can ebb and flow. Some can be in the middle, some can be in the, middle, some in the end. Like it is Pandora's box as to, what day and what symptom and at what severity these children are experiencing them. I love that you're out here educating because, again, as we've already said, I really feel it is one of the pillars as to how we're going to move forward the treatment for PANS and PANDAS. And so we really need to empower parents, and we need to empower parents because, unfortunately, providers are not educated. However, from a preventative standpoint, and of course, from a root cause standpoint, this is not how most healthcare providers are trained, and especially with these newer childhood epidemics and how they have manifested and how their response to our immune system and nervous system is unfolding. This is new science. It's a completely different way of thinking, and it's not to throw blame. It's not to throw judgment. It's not to degrade the training or education of some of these providers. It's just this has happened so abruptly, and we're lacking in knowledge. And so, again, I was so excited to see your work and that you were really putting education at the forefront, because parents are going to be the tip of the spear of moving this forward. And so, again, we have to get these stories out. We have to get these animations out. We have to get these symptoms out, because parents are really going to be the ones that are going to help their children get closer to a diagnosis. It was interesting. You brought up like they were almost possessed. I felt that way as well. And in fact, I remember talking to a spiritual mentor of mine and literally bringing this up. Now, they can act possessed, but I think what's really interesting in you bringing this up is that I really do feel this was evil's grenade to throw into humanity, because not only does it impact the child, it gets at the heart of the family. It completely disrupts your finances. It's completely disrupting the educational experience for the child. It's hitting everything in your marriage. It's hitting your surrounding family. I mean, there's nothing that this does not touch. And so it's important that as we talk about this, that the delivery system and treatment are almost two different things. And so that's what I'm relishing in at the moment around more women in business and entrepreneurship and femtech and famtech, and why this is so important, because so many of our systems are outdated, and it is making diagnosis and diseases or challenges like PANS and PANDAS, like autism, like sensory processing, like ADHD. It is taking entirely way too long for some of these children and families to get the answers they need, because A, it's not understood well, but B, it's these delivery systems as to how we're getting access to care. So how many people would you say you had to go through before you got to the answers that you needed?
Wait. Everyone knows a guy, but I got a gal. Chica Creative knows branding is more than just a logo. It's a story, an experience, a message. It's your magic. Need help capturing yours? Visit chicacreative.com.
Altogether, probably we've seen 10 doctors, or, had some online consultations too. And yeah, we came to the diagnosis ourselves. So in the end, none of these doctors we've seen was of any help. I would say some of them even have directed us to the wrong path, because and some of them were arrogant in the way they reacted to what we told them. And again, I want to say that many of these doctors, I'm very thankful for them trying to do what they tried to help us. In the hospital, I had a feeling they really tried to find out. They just didn't know what's going on, and they kind of made it clear, we don't know. You need to somehow deal with it yourself. But some doctors, we were close to the right path, we have noticed a certain correlation while I was in the hospital with her, that actually her symptoms got recently dramatically better at the same time as her tonsils got more swollen. So we started thinking about this correlation. She was like hardly breathing at night because of these tonsils. And even in the hospital, they said, this is unusual for a child to have such tonsils. And when I asked the neurologist, could it be that these tonsils have something to do? Maybe at night she doesn't have enough oxygen and maybe this impacts the brain function. And she said, no, for sure not. There is no way. And then the throat doctor, we say laryngologist in Poland, denied it too. He said, there is zero chance tonsils have anything to do with the brain. And we somehow believed them and abandoned this path for a while. Luckily, then we came back to this. It turned out that in her case, this was one of the key players. And once we cut out her tonsils completely, luckily quite fast, many of her symptoms disappeared forever. Some stayed, probably because of some other underlying infections she already had then we didn't know about. But this was actually such an important part of this puzzle. And then again, I was shocked again and again. How can a doctor say something 100% is not possible if human body is so complex and we hear constantly of very unusual things and there is constantly a case which is unsolvable. So how can somebody say 100% not? So this was like a lot of shocking moments we've had while going through this healthcare journey. In the end, we came to the diagnosis ourselves, and only then we found the right community, which, online community in Poland, actually, it's very strong and very helpful. And from then we were directed to the right providers. We had to travel through the whole country. We live in the south. Our doctor is in the north. So generally to see a doctor, I guess like many PENS families, we travel far. We can have some things done remotely, but unfortunately a lot of tests have to be done physically where you are. So we've had many samples, blood, urine sent all over the country, Europe, some even flew to the States, and that's how we managed to get a lot of answers. But it was, like you say, extremely expensive, chaotic, because it's not that we got like a clear algorithm of what we should do as next steps. Like we had a extremely long list of tests which we sooner or later we need to do to exclude certain maybe metabolic issues or maybe some, things, some genetic factors, all the infections, bacterial, viral, Lyme, co-infections. We still haven't tested everything. And even deciding on what you should do next was so overwhelming. Like in the beginning, I was relieved we finally have the diagnosis. And I thought, okay, now it's simple. We know what it is. We will treat it according to what they say online. And I was very hopeful that, we cut out the tonsils, she gets antibiotics, problem solved. Maybe in the future she will get strep again, but it's going to be resolved. And then month by month, we were realizing that actually it's not that simple. And we were told from the beginning, we have a very important woman here in Poland, Paulina, she's a consultant. She's has got science background herself, and she had a child with this disease too, which is now in a 5 or 6 year long remission. And she's now helping all the mothers navigate this too. And in the beginning, she said, you need to do all these tests sooner or later. It's not that you can do some of them, even if you find one pathogen and treat it, you don't know if the others are not there. And I couldn't believe this is possible, that this is our case. I thought we are the simple case. It's just strep and we will solve it. Now I know in the end she was right from the beginning. It's just that we had to take it step by step. This diagnostic process was very intense because, like I mentioned, each type of test was done in a different specialized lab. Luckily, we have a lot of amazing labs in Poland, but in different towns. So we had to travel, we had to send samples. Some of them went to Germany and overseas. But it was extremely chaotic, and I was missing a bit this step-by-step algorithm, like what I should do as a next step. What is most important now? It can't be that everything is important. So probably we lost a few months of this chaotic diagnostics. Now it's like slowly, I take my time. I don't go crazy with these tests. I know that, okay, this month we focus on this element. Next month we will focus on something else. I accepted the fact that this will take years until we have sorted it out. And it's much more relaxing now. In the summer of last year when we were trying, I thought we absolutely immediately we need to sort it out and treat it. And I thought it's even possible. Now I know that it's really slow process. And since I accepted this fact that it's going to take a long time and many pieces of a puzzle, and even if there are experts who can help me and my husband, we are the only people who really know the case so deeply and can see correlations. And without our active, proactive behaviors, even the experts won't be enough to help us. This is also the message, very important message from this journey, which I've learned, that it's all in the parents' hands in the end. You can get help, but most of the things you have to do, and every child is different, and you need to take over this role and educate yourself as much as you can, because no matter how amazing the experts are, you know your child better, and you see what works, what not the best.
What you're doing and what I'm doing are the yin and yang, I feel, of the education and wanting to bring the treatment. And so you brought it up earlier that there were some positives that came out of this. And so understanding what this was, understanding how broke it was, understanding the systems that needed to change. So again, we brought up, right, like evil's intent with this. And it was like, listen, you picked the wrong mom, because I'm going, right, to do something about this. And that's what you've done too. And it's nothing against any of the other moms or any of the other families out there that might be finding themselves on the floor right now, because I want to be honest, I was there at one point too. And I'm sure you were as well. Like, I really, like, you used the word acceptance. Yep. Had to get to acceptance, had to go through anger, right? Really process what was going on, work through some PTSD. And it took me about 2 years. And so I hope for people listening and maybe hear your story and mine, this didn't happen overnight. I went and got my health coach certification and, completely went through certification with Epidemic Answers and just lived on various sites and did the education and got the training. And so I know you did the same. I saw there were some courses that you took as well around brain inflammation and immunology. And so I want people listening that whether you're in this realm of what we're talking about with pans and pandas, or you're out here in corporate and you think these things happen overnight, they do not. If anything, I was on the floor, and that's where I had to let go of a lot of things and decided what I was picking back up. But I was like, you know what? As an entrepreneur, I was like, am I going back to school and am I going to become a functional medicine doctor? Am I going back to get my nurse practitioner license? And it just became very apparent to me as someone who's an entrepreneur. I'm like, actually, it's the delivery system and the logistics around this that need to change. And so I know through the JOS district, that's what I'm building. And it is to address all of these things that you're saying. It's giving people a front door to walk through, to be able to get a trail map and chunk this out based on their bandwidth, based on their finances, based on the assistance and help that they do have from family or friends, or maybe they don't. It's to help them understand their nutrition. It's to help them reduce toxic load. And it's most importantly, helping them line up with the right providers based on wherever they are across the world. But it's giving them access to individuals who understand, who have been there, and who know the right players in this game. And it's going to save their families time. It's going to save their families money, and it's going to save them sanity, and it's going to save them trauma. And that's what we need. I'm so moved lately by all I'm seeing in femtech. And, women, we cannot pour from an empty cup. So these femtech initiatives are really important for women's health. But I'm somewhat laughing. I mean, I think it again goes parallel, because if we're not addressing what's going on in the family unit, I mean, Amelia, you and I both know most moms are still holding a huge portion of the caretaking roles with children. And so if these childhood epidemics are rising at the rate that they are, and they are, this is impacting women being able to work. It's being able to impact if kids can get to school, and that means parents can't work, especially women. And if they can't get better because they don't have access to the type of care that they need, because most insurance companies or state-funded programs are not offering the type of treatment that these kids can get better, then again, parents aren't working, kids aren't going to school. And so I know for me, it was taking the positive out of this, that it made me understand grief from any perspective better, whether it be death, divorce, job loss. Like I lost so much in such a short amount of time. And that was a positive that came out of it for me. Another positive was being able to come up with a solution for families to be able to navigate this and not have to go through a 6-year journey like I did, or a handful of years journey like you did. And so that's a little bit about my experience and some of the positives that came out. I mean, what are some of yours outside of obviously building Beyond PANS? And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that through this answer, but like, what are some of the positives that you got from this?
So before the disease, we had like very clear vision of how our parenting is going to be, what schools we want them to go, what activities we want them to do. There won't be screen time in our home, maybe, rarely as a kind of a reward. They for sure won't eat sweets. And we had like these very big visions, and we were kind of like building our lives around what we want for our kids. And now really we let go of all of this and we just follow them. A bit like with a small baby, you just follow their needs. If they want to stay at home for 3 days, we don't push them. We understand this now there is a reason, and there is always a reason why they, feel a bit worse on a given day, and we don't push them. And for sure, screens have been very useful. And during the flares, which was one of my fears, will we ever get them out of screens? Especially my daughter, who used screen time as a very helpful regulation type of tool. And of course, now I see that, when she's in a good state, she completely doesn't care about screens. She prefers to play with friends. And I see how, all our worries, parenting-related worries from the past are completely gone. And really the only thing which matters now is that, they are feeling fine. And it makes life so much easier. Making decisions is so much easier. When we plan a holiday, we only consider their needs. We know that we can't go to a very crowded place because my daughter still has some sensory issues. It's all about their fun and, them feeling good. And really, life is easier when you have reduced the number of choices, and it's very simple to make a decision. So for me, it's been a very positive change. Like I said, we appreciate tiny things, every smile of a child. When the child wakes up in the morning and smiles instead of raging right away, this is every time gives us joy. We never have enough of this. In the past, child smiling in the morning was kind of taken for granted. So I hope this feeling stays with us forever, because it's really, I think I'm a happier person than I was before. And as for this initiative which I started, Beyond PANS, this was also lucky. I also feel a bit that finally the thing which I for so long wanted to do, I really had this idea of having my own personal project, combining science and art. And I had for years, thought about what I'm going to do. And I had thousands of ideas what I'm going to share and, how. And for sure, there were always more important things to do. And then finally, when this thing started, it became so obvious that this is exactly what I wanted to do. Just now I have a very concrete topic, which makes it easier too, because I don't need to choose out of millions of topics. And not only I can do this personal project, but I also see amazing impact. I get a lot of messages from women who really thank for, giving them the words now to talk about this with their family or doctors. And I understand that I think I would have needed it myself too, at the beginning, for somebody to really break it down for me into these pieces. So I really feel sometimes it's not a coincidence that exactly me with this set of, let's say, passions and skills and some professional background, because turning science into visuals, it's what I'm doing now professionally for 12 years. All these things aligned, and probably this combination is like one in a million, and I want to use it and make the best out of this. So it's like my new hobby, which like I will try every week, no matter what, to have something published. And this has made me connect with so many people like you, which probably I would never have a chance to meet. And I see it's a bit like a snowball. It started small. I thought, let's see what comes out of it. I will share something. And it's really like building up. And I have even some ideas in the future of maybe monetizing part of my work. I have some ideas. This is probably not going to happen in the next years because that's not my target. But I see more and more the opportunities that may arise from this. So I feel lucky that this happened to us, not to somebody else, because I know that I feel like I'm on this mission, and I was given these tools, and I have the luck of being able to do this, and also to but having our own company with my husband, we can really decide ourselves how much work we take on every month. We want to make sure that every week I have time for doing this project, even if it means taking less orders. And I'm extremely lucky to be able to do this.
So, Amelia, you had made mention that you get told how passionate you are, and that at 5.5 years old, I think you said it was your daughter who just had this thought of having no joy in her life. And I hear that a lot as well, that, Alicia, you're so passionate about this. And it always takes me back when someone says that comment to when my daughter was 4 and she had just gotten this, and she said, "Mom, I want to die." And no 4-year-old should ever have to feel or think that way. And that's when I knew something was completely wrong. I knew that something was going on with her that was different. I knew that this was more than what was being called mental illness. I knew that something greater was happening within her mind and body, and there was. And I feel that, with the suicide rate in the United States, it's the second leading cause of death in kids aged 9 to 24. So when I say I am so happy about your work, my friend, I don't know as a parent that there's anything more important that we could be working on right now, because again, I just sit here with that statement that suicide is the second leading cause of death. You and I both know, as mothers caught in this world, this is a contributing factor. We know brain inflammation is a much larger contributing issue. It's not being talked about. And so again, I commend the work that you're doing, because by allowing parents access to this information, knowing that this is a consideration, it's truly saving lives. And so again, thank you for taking this. Thank you in taking this arch in science and turning it into something that is not only needed information, it's a movement to, again, empower parents to take control of what's happening to our children. I think that's what's difficult for me at times. And again, this is so big, right? We look at some of the contributing factors that are causing this immune dysregulation in kids, and it's the chemicals in food, it's the chemicals in air, it's the chemicals in our water, it's the chemicals in our products, right? Like, we have this modern world and this toxicity that's now coming with it. And I think what makes me really upset and sad as a parent is we have control to fix this. Unfortunately, the powers to be are not making those moves. And so as a parent, this is one of the number 1, 2, and 3 things that we can be doing right now. Now, it feels so big, right? How do you change your air? How do you take control of that? And that, to me, was where the Joss District was such a need and a place for parents to say, look, we can control what we can control. Walk through this front door, and we're going to help you chunk this out. Like you said, the journey might be a minute, right? It might be, a couple of weeks for some parents. It might be a couple of months for others. And for some of us, like it was, it's going to be a couple of years. But I think that's what's so beautiful about this, is that there are answers, and that we can control this, and that we can get our kids better. And for many of them, they can reverse this. But if you're out here trying to navigate this amongst the system that this is currently operating within, it is confusing and it is messy. So What are a few things that you think need to change? I mean, clearly I have some, and I'm working that on the diagnosis and treatment and support side because the parents are needing uplifted in the most dynamic ways with this. But what do you think? Like, I would love to see educators get up to speed on this information. I think emergency room doctors, for sure, pediatricians, and therapists, which is where we ended up first. And by them not being educated on this, I'm quite certain that through a couple of conversations that we had, that they were concerned we were abusing our child. And like you said at the beginning, when you're behind closed doors and how they're acting, and then how they come out here and present themselves sometimes. I mean, there was a huge disconnect with what I was telling our therapist and then how my daughter was showing up. And had they just been educated on this, how much trauma that would have reduced for us here coming to a provider short of begging for help, and then now having a consideration. And I get why the consideration has to be there, right? I mean, I know they're also doing their job, but they're also doing a disservice to parents and children by not being educated on these issues.
Yeah, I also wondered in the beginning, like, what is the most important now to, move something, change something? Is it more about educating parents? Is it more about educating the public in general so they are aware that there is this disease and it's not rare? Or is it more about, educating doctors who, I've learned now that doctors and scientists don't have much in common. It's, scientists do the work, and doctors don't sit at home and read scientific papers and then make decisions based on this. They are trained in a medical school to follow certain, paths, and they have to follow guidelines which are set by the state usually. And even if they would like to explore some new paths, and even if they are open to, learning more about the disease, they don't have time for this. Of course, in a private office, they can make time by just charging more. And they don't have the tools. And I've seen how this hospital, like staying in this hospital for 10 days have taught me so much about the system. Like you are even thought about doing postgraduate studies about public health, about policy making, how all these decisions are made, who makes these decisions. So what was very shocking for me in the hospital stay was that, I briefed, we got a doctor, very, a woman, she was very caring, and it felt like she wants to help us. And I told her all the symptoms that Luna had in the last weeks, which she never had before. And then after me talking for 3 minutes, she said, okay, but if you could just mention one symptom, which is like the worst for you, let's focus on this one symptom. And I thought, well, if you reduce it to one symptom, this is not presenting this whole, this is not telling the story. And then when, these doctors were going from room to room and she was briefing them, these professors, and every day there was this group of doctors, and the one doctor was briefing the rest about the case. And what she was telling them about the case compared to what I have shared was really just like 1% of what I shared. And of course, for them, this didn't look concerning at all. They saw the girl who was sitting on the bed responding to questions. And that's when I realized it's not that the doctors have bad will. It's just that the system doesn't allow them to explore it further because, they have to follow guidelines. They don't have time to spend, if she had 1 hour per day for every patient, of course she would get deeper into this. She couldn't. Then the specialists, specialists are trained in this very narrow field. And I always thought before that, the doctors who have specializations know more and are, more advanced, and they have wider knowledge. Now I see actually quite opposite. The doctors who have helped us the most were general practitioners who have been our holistic approach. These were, doctors who are maybe young, don't have huge experience, but they are willing to read the science, and they are open, and they are willing to experiment. And they set up their own private practice because they know this is the only way for them to do it their way. So I've completely, it has opened my eyes to, what is really needed. In the end, what is needed is a doctor who is a holistic approach, and who, if they don't know something, they are willing to spend time on researching this, because really there is so much research on so many of these topics. And if many parents would be willing to pay these doctors for this research and for making conclusions out of this. But, in Poland, we have, I don't know, maybe 2 doctors who at the moment are dealing with this disease. You wait for months to get a spot. And, they are also overwhelmed. There is nobody else who can help. Even I get now, I'm in touch with women from many other European countries, from the Western countries, who are starting to look for options in Poland. Normally, Poland was considered, less developed healthcare-wise for a very long time. But now they see that the Western systems, which are even more like structured and black and white, that these type of diseases are handled worse than they are in countries, post-communist countries like Poland, like Ukraine, like, countries of the Eastern Bloc, where I have a feeling doctors have more freedom and there are less regulations. I understand regulations are important, but when the state system doesn't manage and they admit we don't know what to do, you should be allowed to go to a doctor who will explore things, and together you may call it experimenting. But if you don't have a choice, you will experiment, you will try everything to solve this problem. So we need these doctors, and we need the state to allow these doctors to do their job. Because at the moment in Poland, we have this problem that 1 year ago, you had much higher chance to get treated for this disease. Many more doctors were handling it. But something happened a few months ago. I would like to understand what exactly happened, but some of them were told that they have to stop doing this.
Yeah.
Because it's all like experimental and there is no research really, which is like conclusive. And if they continue doing this, they may lose their license. I've heard it now from many patients and doctors. So this is the scary part. Like if the system doesn't help, then it should not block those doctors who are willing to help. They are making actually easier for the state because, I pay the insurance and I don't get anything out of it. So I just send my money and don't get anything for this. They should be happy that now I have my own doctor who can help me and I won't overload their system. That's crazy for me. I don't know why it's possible, and I would like to understand more all this, the level of policies of different countries, especially in Europe, seeing the more advanced the, medical developments are, the more, advanced surgeries and cancer therapies are in a given country, the less they manage these complex diseases. And this is very hard to understand.
I agree. We at the Joss District work with some of the brightest and greatest here in the States through Epidemic Answers, through Aspire, and through MAPS. And so for anybody listening in your network as well, if they would like some amazing resources, those are 3 really great, robust organizations to look into. Also, our providers through the Joss District, which again are functional medicine providers, functional nurse practitioners, functional health coaches, nutritionists, therapists, occupational therapists, neurology and immunology. We believe in Dr. Nancy O'Hara and her protocol and the science that she has done and the research studies she has completed. And so she's another one to follow, Dr. Nancy O'Hara, and she's out in Connecticut, but she is really spearheading and pioneering the PANS and PANDAS work and has created a membership program through her website that regardless of what part of the world that you're in, that she has really given providers and parents the tools and resources that they also need. But I feel like through the Joss District, this was everything you just explained. One of the greatest needs that we saw that coming through this door was really creating a concierge type level service to help individuals find a provider and a safe provider, one that is trained because of what you went through and because what I went through. But to your point as well, I'm interested in getting the testing put together in a more comprehensive way, because again, we're not just looking for a needle, we're looking for needles. And even that is siloed. And when you have to piece it apart, it becomes more expensive. And it's TFT, it's trauma from treatment for the children. And so if we can bring even some of the testing together, and do that at one time, we're not only getting better information, but we're providing a better experience for the children who I think, that's who's really being impacted by all of this. And again, it goes to that rate that we talked about, which suicide, at least in the States, is the second leading cause of death. I think we have many more issues than our European friends, because at least you guys are doing a lot of the right things with at least pulling out, you have the better food sources. You have, paid leave that allows parents at times to be able to even care well for their children. And so I believe our rates are even worse here because we have taken out the compassion and nurturing and meeting families where they are. And if we can't invest in women and families, then we don't have a strong foundation to stand on. But we have prioritized greed in exchange for the health outcomes of families here in the United States. And so we're looking for solutions. I think employers are going to get desperate here soon in the States. I mean, again, with parents needing to step away from work or their kids sick all the time, like there's going to have to be a happy medium that happens here. And so, with institutions like the Joss District, it will be interesting. We're starting to talk to employers about our product because it's a comprehensive approach that brings everything under one umbrella and it's streamlined, but organizations are looking for solutions. They know that root cause care is going to get individuals better and keep them better longer, but it's just unfortunately where we're at, not something that is valued at this moment. So I think that's what it's going to take. Like, I think it's going to take a lot of mama bears uniting who have been through this. And whether we're in the States or you're over there in Poland, but it's pulling our networks together and really figuring out what can we do to change this. I find myself at times not annoyed. And I don't want to bring judgment to this, but I now stand on the other side of this and I see what's at stake. And I can't put that pressure on other families or other mamas who haven't been through it, right? But now that I have been through it, I'm really interested in partnering with women like yourself or other organizations because we know what's at stake. And I truly believe that with women holding 80% of the purchasing power, right, across the world, that we hold more than a vote, we hold a dollar. And that dollar can bring down a lot of different things. And so our children deserve better. And it's why I'm so ecstatic that it has to start somewhere. And I love the work that you're doing so that parents and children can get their families back on track. I am just honored to have come across your work and the passion that you've put forth in your mission to help others. And so I know we're coming up on time, but is there anything else that you feel would be pertinent to the conversation today, that whether it's a family struggling with pans and pandas on the beginning, in the middle, or on the end, or as it relates to systems and structures that you would like to leave our listeners with today?
Yeah, I think like my tip would be from where we've been and what we've seen here in Poland and in Europe. Like don't blame the doctors. It's not that they have bad intentions. They are really limited in what they can do. Like in every job, you've got good and bad guys. And instead of expecting that the system will help you and, blaming the system and being frustrated, there is really a lot you can do, which in the end, I've proven that with small steps, you can make like slow improvements. Because I've seen, responses which prove that something has really made it easier for somebody. And, that one more member of the family finally believes this because now they understand it and they believe it. And, bit by bit, by educating yourself too, you unfortunately, for me, fortunately, as I like learning about these things, but you need to try to understand what's going on. There is AI. There are tools which help you copy paste research papers and summarize them in a language as if a 7-year-old was supposed to understand it. So you really have tools now. You don't need to be scientist. The more you understand it, the complexity of the human body, the more you will understand why the system is not able to help. Because this is just. The system needs very clear steps, clear biomarkers, and it's understandable. They have budget, and they need to know in advance where this budget goes. If there is a disease like PANS, which has completely unclear diagnostic criteria, which has completely unclear treatment outcomes. One child may respond well to one treatment, another not. You can't plan your budget. It's understandable that they are not able to solve this problem until we have really clear biomarkers and, the research has been done. That's why, don't blame them. Don't expect much from them. You need to do it on your own and with, providers like Joss District and, locally with providers who are holistic. And these people will help you because they have, they are willing to get into this complexity and they are not limited by times and by budget. So you need to take this in your own hands. This is my main message.
I'm going to close with something you brought up at the beginning that really resonated, which was this is a battle. And so I really want to thank you, Amelia, for putting on your armor and getting battle ready and coming out here and creating Beyond PANS. And again, providing a pathway for not only parents, but providers to put this in story form and illustration to outline not just the data, but the experience that individuals and families and children are having with this. And so thank you for being a soldier. Thank you for being battle ready and for reminding our listeners that they're ready for this battle too. And that it's okay to know that we're out here all pioneering, but we have each other. And do not do this alone. I know that was something that likely you did and I did in our journeys, but we didn't know any better because this was so new. And so I'd like to remind our listeners today that this is hard, but you will get through it. You have people who have been here before and that we're here to love and support and provide encouragement. And so there are many different ways to do that, but I encourage every listener to, whether your child has PANS or not, to go follow at Beyond PANS. We will include the links and the story notes for the podcast and just learn more. It might not be your child. It might be a neighbor. It might be a child from your kid's school at some point. It could be a colleague's kid. You are potentially, by arming yourself with this information, changing not only an entire family, but generations for their family moving forward. So Amelia, thank you so much for what you're doing out here. It's an honor and privilege to know you. And my friend, I feel like we certainly have some good trouble ahead.
Thank you very much, Alicia. I'm very happy you connected with me because we are on the same mission, just have different tools, but we have gone through very similar things and we want to do something about this. And I also think this is not the end of our story.
Absolutely not. Well, thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for your gifts. And for all of our listeners, please lean in, connect, and don't do it alone. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Mama Trauma Barbie podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And if you did, please consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or leave a comment on Spotify. I would love to hear your feedback, and if you have any recommendations for future topics, let me know. Stay tuned for more great content, and as always, I look forward to seeing you next time, friend. The information provided in the podcast is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical, health, or nutritional advice.